Do you believe that a one-armed man living quietly in an abandoned locker room could somehow keep the dreams of hundreds of children alive? You might shiver watching him in the rain, wiping down torn footballs like they were the last sacred things he had left in this life. And then during the final match, a three-legged dog suddenly charges onto the field, leaping into the arms of the boy who had just stopped a game-winning penalty. The stadium explodes. But that was only the beginning. This is the story of the ballkeeper, a man who once fell chasing his own dream, and then rose to protect the dreams of others. Subscribe now to our channel to never miss a single powerful, soul-stirring film from us. Night had settled over the crumbling concrete shell of the old stadium, a place long forgotten by crowds and cheers. The air was heavy with moisture, and the flickering orange glow of a broken street lamp barely reached beyond the twisted iron gate. Weeds cracked through the foundation, like nature reclaiming what time had discarded. A hollow wind passed between the rusted bleachers, whispering ghosts of matches past. On a splintered bench near the edge of the field, a man sat hunched over a torn canvas bag. His shoulders, lean but strong, were coated in dust, the faded back of his jersey stitched with the name Otto, the letters almost rubbed away by time. He moved in silence with practiced care. In his calloused right hand, he held a deflated soccer ball, and with a small fraying towel clenched in his teeth, he began to rub at the dirt-streaked surface. He had no left hand. Where it should have been, there was only the stiff cuff of a rolled-up sleeve. The fabric was patched and stained, pulled tight over an arm that ended in nothing. He shifted, turning the ball, gently wiping across it, as if it were a relic, not a piece of worn-out equipment, but a memory. A memory that hurt. Otto worked methodically like a priest cleaning the altar long after the congregation had fled. His movements were slow, but filled with reverence. He polished each panel with care, pausing only when the wind carried in the distant sound of a whistle, not a real one, but the kind your mind plays on repeat long after the sound is gone. His breath caught for a moment. He glanced up. In the far corner of the field near the collapsed goalpost, tangled with vines, a small figure limped through the grass. 4 legs, one dragging. It was a dog. Skinny, mottled fur, matted and dirty. One of its hind legs hung lifeless, barely touching the ground as it hobbled forward, nose twitching. Otto didn't move. He simply waited. The dog paused a few meters away, head tilted, eyes locked with his. The man reached into his bag. No words, just a quiet understanding. He pulled out a half-wrapped ball of kenki and placed it gently on the bench beside him, nudging it toward the dog. The animal hesitated, sniffed the air, then limped closer. They ate in silence. 2 creatures with missing limbs, finding a moment of communion under the broken lights of a forgotten dream. The dog sat beside him now, chewing slowly, eyes wary, but not afraid. Otto offered his last sip of water. The dog declined. The silence between them felt sacred. Then, a voice, sharp and curious from beyond the gate. "Hey, mister." Otto froze. The dog looked up too, ears perked. Another voice, higher, echoing off the concrete walls. "Why are you always cleaning those balls, huh?" Laughter. Then the sound of footsteps running off into the distance, the metallic clang of a bike chain rattling. Otto didn't respond. He merely sighed, looking down at the ball in his hand. His thumb traced the seam between 2 hexagons, then pressed a worn patch where a logo used to be. He stood slowly, stiffly, walked toward the center of the field. The dog limped after him, the limp oddly in sync with Otto's one-armed gait. Standing now in the shadow of the bent goalpost, Otto knelt and placed the ball in front of him. The dog sat beside him. Otto closed his eyes. The stadium grew darker, and then a flash, not on the field, but in his mind. A sudden jolt of metal, screeching tires, a burst of white light as a bus veered, a blaring horn, a single blinding second. Thwack! Glass shatters. The scream of twisting metal collides with bone and flesh and future. Otto's body slamming onto the roadside, his arm somewhere he can't feel anymore. A sharpness at the edge of consciousness. The smell of rubber and iron and blood. A torn glove, a whistle blowing endlessly. Then darkness. The stadium fades back into view. Otto stands alone again, bathed in dim light, his face blank. Only the dog still sees him. He walks back to the bench, slow, as if gravity pulled harder on the broken. He lowers himself down, rests the ball in his lap. His fingers linger on it, trembling now, not from cold, but from memory. His mouth parts. For the first time he speaks aloud. Not to the dog, not to anyone, just to the night itself. They said I'd never touch the field again. He looks down, but the field never stopped touching me. The dog lets out a soft whimper and lays its head on his knee. Otto doesn't pet him, but his hand rests gently on the dog's scruffed fur. He closes his eyes again. In the distance, somewhere beyond the silence, a train rumbles by. A reminder that the world still moves, even when you don't. The moment hangs, long, tense, fragile. Then a loud thud breaks the silence. A soccer ball kicked from somewhere beyond the gate hits the fence and bounces toward the field. It rolls, stops, inches from Otto's foot. He looks at it, then to the dog. The dog barks once. Otto sighs, gets up, walks over, picks up the ball. He rubs at a scuff with his thumb, then begins wiping it with the rag again, as if this was a ritual, as if by fixing one more ball, something might fix in him too. Somewhere deep behind the rusted bleachers, the child's voice calls again. Are you the man who used to play for Ghana? Otto's eyes close. The screen cuts to black. A single frame lingers. A tattered photo. Otto in full kit mid-air, save grinning wide with two arms extended, now folded into the back pocket of his bag. The VHS footage flickered grainy with time. A green field, a roar of the crowd, and a young man in a bright yellow jersey standing tall between the posts. His name echoed across the stands like gospel. Otto Mensah, Otto the Wall. The camera zoomed in as he leapt through the air like gravity had no claim on him. Fingers outstretched, body perfectly arched, snatching a blistering shot from the top corner. The crowd erupted. A commentator's voice crackled over the speaker, giddy with admiration. That's world-class keeping from the boy wonder. Remember this name? Otto Mensah. Rewind. Play again. Stop, rewind. The video paused on Otto's face, frozen in triumph. Sweat on his brow, joy in his eyes. 17 years old. Ghana's U20 prodigy. The boy who had nothing but 2 hands, a net, and a dream. Then came the static, and then the crash. It was supposed to be just another away match. A regional friendly. A chance to be scouted for the big leagues. The team was laughing on the bus, teasing each other, singing. Otto had the window seat earphones, in tapping to the rhythm of a beat only he knew. His bag with the gloves lay beneath his seat. He'd just had them cleaned. He had told his mother that morning, "I'll be back by Sunday. We'll go get your medicine." He never made it. The truck that ran the red light was overloaded. Brakes gone. Its impact sheared through the side of the team bus like a cleaver through fruit. Metal screamed. Screams broke into silence. Otto awoke days later in a hospital alone to a blinding white ceiling and the stench of antiseptic. His head pounded. He tried to sit up. Couldn't. Then he looked left, and nothing was there. The world tilted. He vomited. It took 3 nurses to hold him down as he thrashed, screaming for someone to bring it back. Screaming until he lost his voice, until there was nothing left but the sound of a sobbing child in a grown man's chest. His left arm was gone, ripped from him by one reckless moment. Gone with it, the goal, the stadium, the gloves, the chance, all of it. What remained was silence. When his father arrived 2 days later, he stood stiff at the door, arms crossed. "You were supposed to carry this family," he said. "Now look at you." His mother, thin and coughing into a handkerchief, tried to speak, but was too weak. She took his hand and squeezed. It was her touch, not his father's voice, that pierced deeper. He returned home weeks later, but it wasn't home anymore. The living room was quiet. The neighbors looked away when he passed. His bedroom had been turned into a storage room, as if the family couldn't afford the reminder of what might have been. He tried. God, he tried. He wrapped the bandages himself. Practiced catching with one hand. Kicked against the wall until his foot bled. But every time he saw a goalpost, the noise returned, the blaring horn, the screech of steel, the moment of silence that followed. His mother's health worsened. The medicine grew expensive. His father left without a word one morning. Just gone. One night, as she lay in bed barely breathing, she turned to him. "Promise me, you won't give up the ball." He promised. She died the next day. The house was sold. Otto packed a small bag, one change of clothes, his last pair of gloves, and the deflated ball he kept from his first national match. No one asked where he was going. No one came to stop him. He wandered Accra's outskirts, sleeping under bridges, behind shops, beneath trees in old training fields. Every job he tried fell through. No one wanted a crippled goalkeeper. No one believed he still belonged to the game. Until he found the stadium. It had been abandoned for years. An old municipal pitch swallowed by vines and dust. The locker rooms smelled of mildew. The showers hadn't run in a decade. But the field still had grass. Still had white lines, faint but proud. Still had rusted goals and ghosts. He took shelter in the old changing room. Cleaned it. Made it livable. Just enough to pretend the dream hadn't died, only gone quiet. That's when he met Kofi. The dog was emaciated, foaming slightly at the mouth, with a rope still tied loosely to its collar. Someone had abandoned it and expected it to die. One of its hind legs dragged behind. It snarled when approached. Bit the first time Ado offered it food, but he didn't stop. He came back each day, same time, same place, same offering. Bread, water, patience. By the end of the second week, the dog stopped growling. By the third, it limped up to meet him. By the fourth, it slept beside his makeshift bed. He named him Kofi, a nod to Friday, the day he was found. The day things changed. It wasn't long before the kids came, boys from the nearby slums. They kicked around worn balls made of tape and plastic. They saw Otto sitting on the bench every day and called him Coach, laughing. One day a boy's ball burst. He cried, clinging to it. Otto took it, sat on the ground, pulled a small needle and thread from his bag, repaired it like it was a human heart. The next day, 5 balls arrived. The day after, 10. Kids lined up after practice, waiting their turn, watching him work. Word spread. The one-handed man who fixed balls better than new. In exchange, they gave him leftovers, a boiled egg, a mango, water. One boy even brought a pair of old goalkeeper gloves, just in case. Otto never asked for anything. He took the balls, smiled, cleaned them, repaired the tears. Every stitch was a prayer, every patch a whisper. Don't leave me yet. Don't let this be the end. At night, he'd sit with Kofi and listen to the wind rustling through the torn nets. Sometimes, when the moon was full, he'd walk onto the pitch barefoot and stand in the goal. Phantom glove raised, eyes closed, reliving the roar. Once a teenager approached him. "Were you the Otto Mensah, the one from TV?" Otto smiled. "No," he said. "He was someone else. I just keep the balls now." The teen didn't believe him. No one did. And that was fine, because Otto had come to understand something. He didn't need to play to be part of the game. He didn't need both hands to feel the rhythm of leather on grass. His time on the field might be over, but the field had not forgotten him. And as long as children still played, as long as balls still rolled, there was still purpose, still meaning, still something to hold on to, even with one hand. At the close of the scene, Otto is seen squatting outside the dressing room, surrounded by a pyramid of patched balls. Behind him, Kofi naps in the shade tail, twitching. Otto picks up a torn Adidas, holds it to the light. He smiles, whispers, "Still got fight left in you." The camera pans upward, revealing the peeling paint of the stadium wall behind him. Faded letters barely readable anymore. Home of Champions, as if fate were winking through dust and time. The morning sun in Cape Coast was not gentle. It came in fierce, reflecting off corrugated rooftops, baking the cracked pavement, casting long shadows across the dust-laced field beside the old stadium. The boys were already there, U13s, from the local youth league, running drills half-heartedly, while shouting and laughing more than listening. A battered whistle sliced through the noise, but the sound held no weight. The boys only picked up speed when the old man with the limp raised his walking stick. Coach Mensah, he was not the yelling type, nor the clapping, high-fiving, over-motivating kind. Mensah had played the game before it paid. He still wore the same whistle from his semi-pro days, still polished his black boots before every practice, still used a paper notebook that had survived more rains than the field itself. And that morning, he saw something out of place. By the edge of the fence, where the weeds climbed like vines, reclaiming rusted bones, a man knelt with a rag in one hand and a ball in the other. Mensah squinted. The man wasn't polishing the ball, he was caressing it, turning it gently like handling a family heirloom. The rag was old, threadbare, soaked at the corners. He moved in circles, wiping slowly, even lovingly. Mensah narrowed his eyes. Not many people polished footballs anymore. Not in Ghana. You played them, kicked them, flattened them, tossed them aside. A ragged ball was like a ragged life. You didn't fix it, you replaced it. But this man didn't believe that. He cleaned like he was trying to raise the dead. Mensah stepped closer. The man, slender, mid-30s maybe, eyes deep and tired, didn't flinch. He looked up, saw Mensah, then lowered his gaze again. Wiped another seam. Adjusted a deflated valve with his thumbnail. "You fixing that for someone?" Mensah asked. The man looked at the ball, then back at him. "I'm fixing it for itself," he said. The words sat between them, strange and disarming. Mensah pointed with his stick. "That one won't hold air more than 5 minutes. Stitching's half gone." The man didn't argue. "Still rolls, just needs to know how." Mensah looked down at the bag by the man's feet. 4 more balls, all patched, scraped, but cradled like eggs in cloth. "What's your name?" "Otto." Mensah nodded slowly. "Why don't you let it go?" he asked. "It's just leather and air." Otto looked away, then out to the field. "No," he said. "Not to me. It's more. It's what's left. And it hasn't let go yet." That was the first conversation. Mensah didn't say anything else. He walked off, head full of questions he didn't ask. But that afternoon he watched. Not just the kids, but Otto. He saw him on the sidelines, squatting in the shade, adjusting a boy's laces without being asked. Pointing out a stance, showing another how to angle his foot. No one asked him. No one paid him. Yet he moved with the quiet authority of someone who had once belonged. The next day, Otto returned, and the day after that, always early, always cleaning, sometimes giving the kids gentle corrections when the coaches weren't looking. "Lean forward or you'll tip back. Don't chase the ball, feel where it wants to go." Mensah stayed quiet, but he kept watching. One afternoon, the wind picked up, and the boys abandoned drills to chase a plastic bag like it was a balloon. Mensah barked at them, waved his cane, but they only laughed. The session dissolved. Mensah turned to leave. That's when he saw Otto again, not cleaning this time, but with a small group of the younger boys. He had a stick in one hand, drawing something in the dust, an arc, a line, a series of dots. He gestured to a barefoot boy standing in front of him. "Move like this," he said. 1, 2, plant, then push with your hips. The boy mimicked it. Otto nodded, encouraged. "Feel your weight shift. Now catch with your chest, not with fear, with breath." Mensah frowned. It wasn't textbook. It wasn't even proper form. But the boy did it. And when the ball bounced toward him again, he caught it. Later that night, Mensah stood behind the cracked fence, cigarette burning low, and watched Otto alone under the stadium floodlight, walking across the empty field. His one arm stretched out like he was still guarding a goal. Then came the night of the dog. Kofi had been scavenging near the dumpsters when the trouble started. 3 teens not much older than Mensah's players cornered him with rocks. One tossed the first stone. It hit the dog square in the ribs. Kofi yelped, fell. They laughed. Another rock, and then a shout. Otto's voice cracked the air like a whip. From across the field he sprinted. Not ran, sprinted. The boys froze. The third stone never left the hand that held it. Otto barreled in, one-armed, but full force. He didn't hesitate, threw himself between the dog and the boys. They didn't fight. Just backed off, laughing nervously, muttering crazy cripple as they disappeared into the night. Kofi was whimpering. Otto dropped to his knees, examined the wound, used his sleeve to stop the bleeding. The dog licked his cheek once, then rested his head on Otto's leg. Mensa saw all of it. He said nothing the next day, but he brought an envelope. After the boys finished drills and left, he walked up to Otto, who was, as always, polishing a ball like it was sacred. "I have a team," Mensa said, "but no real keeper coach. No budget either." Otto didn't look up. Mensa continued, "Boys don't listen to men with clipboards. But they'll listen to someone who knows what it means to fall." Still Otto said nothing. "So I'm offering you a job," Mensa added. "Small stipend, meals, equipment access, and purpose." That last word hit. Otto looked up, eyes narrowed. "Why me?" Mensa shrugged. "You clean those balls like they're holy. You teach like you forgot how to stop. And you saved a dog with one damn arm. That's good enough for me." Otto lowered the ball, rested it in his lap. "What if I fail them?" Mensa smiled. "Then fail better than anyone else ever tried." The dog barked once, almost like approval. Otto glanced at Kofi, then back at the ball. His fingers tightened around the leather, and for the first time in years, he nodded. It wasn't triumph, it wasn't return, but it was a beginning. And beginnings, Otto had learned, are just victories dressed in rags. It started with whispers. They circled the field like smoke, low, uncertain at first, then thick and biting. Parents lining the edge of the pitch, some leaning on motorbikes, others under umbrellas to escape the brutal Ghanaian sun eyes, narrowed fingers pointing. "Is that the new coach?" "No, not a coach. Just the one-armed man from the old stadium. They say he used to play for the national team before the accident. Used to," one woman snapped. "That doesn't mean he should be near my son." By the third day, the whispers had grown into words. By the fifth, those words were knives. It happened just before warm-up. Otto had arrived early as always, walking the boundary of the field, with Kofi trailing him. He stopped to set out cones, kneeling with one hand, adjusting each cone with a precision that almost seemed excessive. But it wasn't for the cones. It was for control, for presence, for grounding. But as he straightened, a man's voice cut across the field. "Hey!" Otto turned. A father, wide-chested and sunburnt, stood near the goalpost, with arms folded tight. His boy, thin and nervous-looking, held a water bottle at his side and avoided eye contact. "Are you supposed to be coaching?" Otto didn't answer, not because he was afraid, but because he didn't understand the tone yet. The man stepped closer. "I asked you a question. Are you coaching my son?" Otto hesitated. "I help where I can." The man sneered. With one hand, from the sideline, other murmurs joined like a rising tide. "He's not licensed. He's broken. What can he teach my child is not some charity case." Another parent, a mother in a bright kente dress and heavy earrings, chimed in. "My son comes here to become a professional. I don't need a cripple filling his head with false hope." That one landed harder than the rest. The word, cripple. Otto didn't flinch. Not outwardly. But inside something recoiled, not from insult, but recognition. It was the word his father had never said, but always meant. Kofi sensed it first. He stood up, ears twitching, low growl in his throat. Otto placed his hand gently on the dog's back. "Easy," he whispered, but the voices kept coming. "How do we know he's safe? Why doesn't Mensa find a real coach? He's just a mascot, a pity project." Mensa heard it all from the far end of the field. He was watching the kids stretch, but the commotion pulled him across. He arrived just as Otto began packing up the cones slowly, without saying a word, not out of shame, but to protect the team from the storm, to make the choice easier for everyone else. Then came the bark, loud, sharp, from Kofi, who now stood between Otto and the crowd like a soldier guarding a fallen king. He barked again and again. Some of the kids turned, startled. Even the parents took a half step back. And Otto? He paused. His hand hovered over the last cone. Then Mensa's voice boomed behind them, louder than the dog, louder than the doubt. "You should all be ashamed." Silence. He walked slowly into the center of the confrontation, eyes burning under his cap. "You come here every week begging me to make your boys stronger, smarter, better. But the first man who shows them how to fight with one hand instead of two, you want him gone." A few parents shifted uneasily. Mensah didn't stop. You think talent builds character? You think muscles mean leadership? This man, he pointed at Ato, knows what it's like to lose everything and still come back. You think your sons need a perfect coach? They need a real one. One woman raised her hand weakly. But what if? Mensah cut her off. He's not here to impress you. He's here to serve the game. And if you want to pull your kids because they might learn humility, courage, or how to rise after being broken, go ahead. No one moved. The father who had started it all cleared his throat. He still doesn't have credentials. Mensah stepped forward, calm but cold. Neither did the first man who taught me how to dribble barefoot in the dirt. And he turned out to be my father. Otto stood frozen. He hadn't expected defense. Not like this. He looked at Mensah, then at the parents, then down at Kofi, who was still standing alert, but quieter now. Finally, he looked across the field. That's when he saw Yaw, a small boy, maybe 11, with oversized gloves and fear in his eyes. He had been the backup goalkeeper for months, always benched, always the one who fumbled, the one the others teased. And he was watching Otto like he was a lighthouse in a storm. The boy took a step forward, then another. He came to Otto's side, stood beside him without saying a word, and looked at the cones still lying in the grass. Then softly, "Will you teach me?" Otto blinked. "Yes," he said, and that was it. No speech, no grand apology from the parents. Just that one boy crossing a line no adult dared. Later that day, after practice had officially ended, Otto stayed behind. So did Yaw. They sat at the far end of the field, near the broken fence where no one bothered them. The sky was beginning to bruise with dusk. The field empty. Only the sound of crickets and the occasional bark from Kofi. Yaw stood nervously in front of the makeshift goal Otto had built from bamboo and twine. Otto tossed him the ball. "Let me see how you hold it," he said. Yaw raised his arms, gripped the ball tight. Otto frowned. "Too stiff. Like you're trying to catch thunder." "Relax." Yaw tried again. "Good. Now listen. Listen to what Yaw asked." "To the ball." Yaw blinked. "It doesn't talk." Otto smiled, small and tired. "Yes, it does. Just not in the way you expect." He stepped forward, picked up a stone, and dropped it at Yaw's feet. "Close your eyes." The boy hesitated. "Trust me." Yaw obeyed. "Now," Otto said, "I want you to fall. Just fall." The boy opened his eyes in panic. "What?" "Fall," Otto said again. "Right now. On the ground. I'll get dirty." "You will?" Otto nodded. "And you'll learn what the ground feels like. Because if you're afraid of the ground, you'll never dare to fly." Yaw bit his lip, then dropped backward arms out into the dirt. The dust puffed around him. "Good," Ato said. "Now get up." The boy stood, brushing himself off. Again, they did it 10 more times. By the 11th, Yaw stopped bracing for the fall. He let it happen. Trusted it. When they were done, the boy sat on the grass panting. "Why did we do that?" he asked. Otto knelt beside him. "Because being a goalkeeper is not about catching the ball." Yaw looked confused. "It's about catching yourself," Otto said, "every time you fall." From then on, every afternoon, Yaw stayed late. Not because he was the best, but because he was the only one who looked at Otto and didn't see what was missing, but what remained. Mensah watched from a distance, arms folded, nodding to himself. The seed had taken. The crippled coach, the scared boy, and the 3-legged dog. An unlikely trio on a fading field, beginning something that would outlast them all. They began to listen differently, not just with their ears, but with skin-breath instinct. Under Otto's quiet guidance, the boys learned to stop chasing the ball like prey. Instead, he taught them to feel it, to wait, to breathe with it. It started with a simple exercise. The sun was low in the sky, casting long golden fingers across the cracked field. The cones were set aside. The goal posts stood quiet. "Lie down," Otto said. The boys looked at each other confused. Yaw blinked. On the grass, Otto nodded. One by one, the young goalkeepers lay on their backs. The world upside down, the sky endless. Otto stood above them, a ball in hand. He bounced it gently. "Close your eyes," he said. "Now tell me, when do you hear it hit the ground?" A few seconds passed. "Thump!" "Now," a boy said. Late, Otto replied. He bounced again. "Thump!" "Now." Still late. Again. He moved closer, kneeling. You don't wait for the ball to hit to notice it, he said. You hear its breath before it lands. You hear the wind bending, the way grass shifts. The sound is not the first signal, it's the last. The boys opened their eyes. Silence hung thick in the air. Listen deeper, he whispered. From then on, every drill changed. Catching was no longer just about reflex. It was about presence. Otto removed the gloves, told them to feel the raw sting of leather on bare skin. He made them catch with one hand, then with none, using only elbows, chests, shoulders. At first they laughed, but then it became real. One afternoon, he stood in front of Yaw and lobbed a soft shot. The boy, unsure, moved late, the ball hitting his chest and falling. Otto shook his head, walked over. Again, this time he didn't throw. He kicked, a low curling ball that skidded across the grass. Yaw panicked, dove early, missed. Otto approached, picked up the ball. You're trying to control something you don't yet understand. He held the ball in front of the boy's face. It's not about stopping it. It's about reading it. Yaw stared at him. How, he asked. Otto smiled slightly. You don't read words. You read rhythm. That's when the drills changed from athletic to artistic. Otto stood barefoot in the goal, showing how to use the shoulder to glance a shot wide, how to lower the knee to clip a bounce. He moved like a sculptor, carving space out of air, each movement slow and sharp, like someone remembering the shape of their own body after forgetting it for years. Mensah watched from a distance. He saw the change not just in the form, but in the fire. The boys who once played for attention now played for understanding, for quiet mastery. They leaned forward when Otto spoke. They practiced long after drills ended. They started bringing their own tools, needles, tape patches to fix balls like he did. The balls mattered now, because the balls spoke. And Otto was the only one who had ever listened long enough to teach others how. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. Yaw stood in the narrow shadow of the rusted goalpost. The team had been scrimmaging, dust in the air, laughter echoing, until the final kick of the session. The shot came from across the field, fast, low, and wild. For a second, Yaw hesitated. Everyone watching thought he'd miss, but he didn't. He dove, not desperate, but sure. He met the ball mid-roll, catching it against his ribs, using his forearm like a ledge, then cradled it before his back, hit the ground. Silence, then cheering. Even the older boys clapped. Otto didn't say a word. He simply nodded. Mensah stepped forward from the sideline. Kitty said, bring your parents next week. You're playing in the district qualifiers. Yaw froze. Me. Mensah nodded. You. The boy's eyes turned to Otto, seeking confirmation. Otto gave it with a quiet grin. That night, Otto sat alone outside the changing room. Kofi lay by his feet. The wind moved gently through the field like a spirit with unfinished business. The sky was bruised blue stars scattered like forgotten names. From behind him, footsteps approached. A young man, tall, lean, early 20s. In his hand, a small plastic bag. Otto turned. The man smiled nervously. I think you remember me. Otto squinted, then recognition. Kojo, he said. You played midfield for the Sharks. Kojo nodded. You taught me how to lace my boots. Said left foot's only useless if you never use it. Otto chuckled. Didn't know I was that poetic. You weren't, Kojo grinned. You were angry. You said it while yelling. They both laughed. Kojo held out the bag. Something for you. Otto opened it. Inside a pair of goalkeeper gloves. Old but cared for. The leather dark and soft. Not factory new, but better. I kept them from my last tournament. You know, just in case. Otto looked down at the gloves in his lap, and suddenly he couldn't move. Tears welled in his eyes before he realized. His chest tightened. His throat locked. I can't take this, he said. You already did? Kojo replied. When you fixed my ball 10 years ago, I didn't have a father. You were the first man who didn't laugh when I said I wanted to play. Otto's voice cracked. I didn't do anything. You didn't leave. That's when it broke. Otto looked at the gloves, then at his hand. The one that remained. He held one glove to his face, breathing it in like incense. Kofi nudged his leg. Mensah stepped from the doorway, arms crossed. He's right, Mensah said quietly. Otto looked up. You didn't leave, Mensah said. You stayed, even when everything told you to run. He walked over, sat beside Ado. Some people think coaching is teaching drills, setting tactics. But the truth is, coaching is just loving the game so fiercely that others catch fire from being near you. Otto said nothing. Mensah looked at the gloves in Otto's hands. You don't keep the ball with your fingers anymore, he said. Then gently he placed his hand on Otto's chest. You keep it here. Otto's eyes closed, the moment too full. I've seen a lot of men come and go. Otto Mensah continued. Men with perfect records, men with perfect health. They coached well. He paused. But you remind them why they started. The wind picked up. The stars blinked harder. In the distance, Yaw was still practicing alone under the dim light of a broken lamppost. Diving, falling, getting up again. Otto looked toward him. Then I'll stay, he whispered. Mensah smiled. You already have. And in that moment, the old gloves no longer smelled like leather. They smelled like the past finally making peace with the present. His skies broke open 3 days before the match. Not just with rain, but with pressure. The kind that doesn't fall from above, but seeps from behind closed doors. Whispered conversations between powerful men. Tight phone calls behind tinted glass. Promises traded like jerseys. Favors owed. The U13 district semifinal had become more than a game. It was now about pride. Politics. A public stage for shadows to dance. And Otto had no place in it. Not officially. Not anymore. Mensah called him into the equipment room the morning before the match. The air was heavy with the smell of wet socks and liniment oil. Outside, the kids were running laps. But inside, a silence wrapped around them like a wet towel. Mensah didn't sit. Otto, he began, eyes cast low. They've asked me. No, Otto cut in softly. They didn't ask. Mensah looked up. They told you, Otto said. Didn't they? Mensah sighed. The chairman's son plays for the other team. The federation doesn't want surprises or headlines. And they say that I'm a liability, Ado finished. Mensah nodded once. His face was unreadable, like a man burying something while still holding the shovel. I fought, Mensah said. I told them you were the spine of this team. That without you, It doesn't matter, Ado interrupted. His voice wasn't bitter, just tired. Mensah stepped closer. I can refuse. I can walk. No, Otto said firmly. You stay. You lead them. You protect them. He picked up his bag. The same torn canvas one he had when he lived in the locker room. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. One last look at the cones he stacked by color. The gloves drying by the vent. The clipboard he never used, but always carried out of respect. Outside, the rain began again. As he walked away from the building, kids stared from windows, unsure if they were allowed to say goodbye. Some waved. Yaw didn't. He simply pressed his hand to the glass and stayed there until Ado disappeared into the curtain of rain. Kofi followed, refusing to stay behind, even when Otto tried to whistle him back. They walked through the city, no umbrella. The streets slick. Puddles wide and dirty. People ducked under awnings as they passed. Otto kept walking, Kofi beside him, step for limp step. By the time they reached the old stadium, thunder was rolling over the hills. The kind of thunder that sounds like regret. Otto sat on the stone bench outside the rusted gate. Kofi lay at his feet, soaked to the skin, but eyes always watching. They didn't speak, they just breathed. The rain hit Otto's face like cold truth. Not cruel, not punishing, just real. That night he stayed inside the old locker room. No electricity, just the soft flicker of a lantern burning from melted wax in a jam jar. He sat with a deflated ball in his lap, rubbing it unconsciously. As if by cleaning it enough, he could clean himself of the shame. He hadn't been kicked out of coaching. He'd been erased. The first time was when he lost his arm. The second time was now. But this time, someone noticed. Just before midnight, a knock. 3 soft taps. Otto didn't respond. He thought it was wind. Then a whisper. Coach. He stood, opened the rusted door. Yaw stood there, drenched, his jersey clinging to his skin. A torn backpack over his shoulder. No umbrella. Just 2 wide, pleading eyes. Does your mother know you're here? Otto asked. Yaw shook his head. Then what the hell are you doing, boy? I need you to teach me. The penalty. Otto stepped back. Tomorrow's semifinal, Yaw continued. They've got Kwabena. He always takes the penalties, always scores. Otto leaned against the doorframe. Mensah will coach you. He doesn't know Kwabena's style. You think I do? Yaw nodded. You study everything. I've seen your notebook. Otto turned away. It won't matter. They won't let me near the pitch. I don't care. Those 3 words broke something open. Otto looked back at him. I don't care what they say, Yaw repeated. You're still my coach. Outside, the rain softened to a whisper. The storm, at least for now, was resting. Otto looked at the boy. Saw himself years ago. Same hunger, same loneliness. Different future, if he could help. Okay, Otto said at last. Drop your bag. Yaw did. Take off your shoes. What? You want to feel the ground. Wet, cold, unpredictable. Like tomorrow. Yaw hesitated, then obeyed. Otto picked up a ball, adjusted it in his hand, and kicked. Not hard, but precise. The ball skipped low and fast to the right. Yaw dove. Late. Again. Left. Late. Again. Middle. Bounce. Too early. The lantern flickered in the wind. Shadows danced across the broken walls. Otto stood still, watching every move. Kwabena always glances left, he said, but kicks right. Last second. You can't trust the eyes. Yaw nodded. You don't guess, Otto said. You breathe. You listen. Let the ball tell you. They trained for an hour. At one point, Yaw slipped, fell hard. Otto walked over, helped him up with one hand. Yaw said, What if I miss? You won't, Otto said. How do you know? Because I'm not letting you miss. The boy smiled, then grew quiet. Are you coming tomorrow? They won't let me on the bench. Can you at least watch? Otto nodded. I'll be where the ball can see me. Yaw didn't understand what that meant, but he believed it. He left before dawn. Shoes soaked, face glowing. Otto sat back down on the bench. The ball still in his lap, his hand on Kofi's head. He didn't say it out loud, but in his heart, he promised the boy something. You will not stand alone, and neither will I. Not anymore. The bleachers groaned under the weight of family scouts and politicians. It wasn't just another youth semifinal. It had become a spectacle. The chairman of the regional football board sat front row, sunglasses despite the overcast sky, a smug expression carved onto his face. His son Kwabena stood midfield with the swagger of someone who had never known loss. The match began tense. Mensah stood on the sidelines, arms folded. Not shouting, just watching, thinking. His eyes occasionally drifted beyond the field toward the back entrance of the stadium, as if expecting a ghost to walk through the rain. But Otto wasn't there, at least not yet. The first half was brutal. The chairman's team played with the confidence of entitlement, pressing high, cutting off passes with ease. Ghana's U13 boys, Otto's boys, fumbled under pressure. Yaw in goal blocked 3 early attempts, but couldn't hold the line forever. The opposing striker broke through on the 27th minute. Goal. They're one. Parents in the crowd exhaled sharply. Yaw stared down at the grass, hands on knees, sweat and doubt rolling down his temple. Mensah pulled the team in at halftime. You're not losing because you're weak, he told them. You're losing because you're scared. Then he looked at Yaw. Who are you waiting for? Yaw didn't answer, just clenched his fists. They went back out. The second half was war. Fouls, shoves, screaming parents, yellow cards tossed like confetti. But Ghana's boys held tighter now. Every tackle felt personal. Every throw-in came with fire. By the 52nd minute, they'd clawed back 1 goal. 1-1. Then in the final minute, chaos. A Ghanaian defender slipped. Kwabena surged forward, ball at feet slicing into the box. The crowd rose like a wave. Yaw stepped up. Kwabena juked left then right too fast. The last defender lunged, missed, and clipped Kwabena's ankle. He fell. The referee blew the whistle. Penalty. The crowd erupted. Some cheered, others screamed. Mensah's jaw tightened. The chairman leaned forward, smiling now. Kwabena picked up the ball, walked to the spot with slow, deliberate steps. Yaw backed into the net alone. He wiped sweat from his brow. His gloves felt heavy. Then he closed his eyes and heard the voice not in his ears, but in his body. Don't trust his eyes. Watch his shoulder. Listen to his steps. The ball talks if you're willing to shut up and hear it. Yaw exhaled. Quabena placed the ball. Otto stood behind the far fence of the stadium, beyond the eyes of the officials. Rain falling on his hooded shoulders. Kofi at his feet. His eyes fixed on the boy he had taught. Quabena took 2 steps back. The stadium held its breath. 1 step forward. The right foot planted, but the shoulder opened early. A flick. A tell. Left foot rose. Yaw lunged. Not left. Not right. But low. Center. Gut. Whump! His body hit the ground hard. But the ball didn't pass. It hit his chest. Fell. Bounced. He reached, gripped, grabbed. Held. Silence. Then, explosion. The bench screamed. The crowd erupted. Boys piled over the sideline. Mensa punched the air. Even the chairman stood in disbelief. But the wildest moment came next. Kofi, without warning, bolted. He jumped the low boundary fence, ignoring Otto's command, dashed across the wet grass tail like a banner in a storm. People gasped. Security hesitated. But Kofi wasn't attacking. He ran straight to Yaw and leapt. The boy, still on his knees, caught him instinctively. The dog licked his face wildly, knocking the gloves off. Yaw laughed. Full open, disbelieving laughter. The kind that only comes from someone who just rewrote their own destiny. Flashbulbs popped. Reporters clicked like mad. The photo would be on 5 front pages by morning. Mensa walked onto the pitch as officials tried to clear the scene. He raised both hands. Let it be, he said. That moment belongs to the boy. He turned to the press box. But the victory, he pointed to the fence. To the man standing there, soaked, silent, a single hand resting on the wire. That belongs to the one who taught him how to fall. Every head turned. Otto stood there, not smiling, not crying, just present. For once not hiding. Mensa's voice cut through the roar. You all know Otto Mensah. Years ago he kept the net for Ghana's U20. The crowd stirred. He lost more than an arm in that accident. He lost his place in the game. Mensah turned back to his boys, but he never let go of the ball. And today, he gave it to someone else. He nodded at Yaw. The dream's alive. Not because of skill, but because of belief. That's what this game is about. Applause began. Hesitant at first, then swelling. The boys clapped, then the parents. Even the chairman's face softened. Kofi barked once, loud, like a full stop. Yaw walked to the fence, dog still following. Otto crouched to meet him. The boy held out the ball. You were there, he whispered. Otto nodded. I heard you, Yaw added. No, Otto said. You heard yourself. I just taught you how to listen. And for a moment, beneath the rain, time stopped. Coach and player, man and boy, wound and healing, holding the same ball. The photo went viral within 24 hours. Not the save, not the celebration, but the frame of a muddy 13-year-old goalkeeper kneeling in victory, smiling through tears as a 3-legged dog leapt into his arms. Behind them, blurred but unmistakable, stood a man with only one hand watching quietly through a fence soaked in rain, his eyes burning with something the camera didn't know how to name. It was titled, The One Who Kept the Ball. Within days, the comments flooded in. This man deserves more than a bench. I don't know his name, but he's the reason that boy flew. Who teaches heart like that? The headlines followed the one-armed keeper who trained a champion. From tragedy to touchline, Otto Mensah's quiet return. The coach with one hand and all the soul. Old teammates came forward. Former coaches. Even a retired sports anchor who remembered calling one of Eto's saves in the U20 qualifiers 15 years ago. But the most unexpected call came from the Ghana Football Federation. It was short, formal, but the meaning ran deep. Otto Mensah is hereby invited to the National Technical Development Program for specialized training in youth goalkeeping instruction. Full scholarship, immediate placement, travel and accommodations provided. Otto read it once, then again, then again. He placed the letter on the bench, sat beside it, said nothing. Kofi barked. Once, twice. Otto looked at the dog, his hand trembling slightly. I never thought, he whispered, they'd see me again. Kofi wagged his tail, indifferent to the politics of redemption. 3 days later, Otto stood in front of the gates of the National Football Training Academy. They loomed taller than he remembered. Fresh paint, artificial turf, security cameras. Young players jogged past in bright kits, whispering when they saw him. Some pointed, one waved. Otto carried a single duffel bag over his shoulder. His other sleeve was pinned at the bicep. He wore no name tag, no badge of honor. Just a simple black jacket and the silent weight of years. He walked through the gates, onto the field, stopped. His shoes met the grass like they were greeting an old friend. The scent of turf and liniment hit him like a punch. For a moment he couldn't move. The world turned quiet, and he wept, not loudly, not dramatically, but like someone who had been underwater for a decade and finally tasted air again. He dropped to his knees, fingers gripping the grass. Kofi trotted up beside him, nosing his cheek confused by the salt in his skin. A young trainer rushed over. Sir, are you okay?" Otto looked up, eyes wild with light. "I'm home," he said. That afternoon his name was added to the class roster. Not as a token, not as a favor, but as a peer. And he trained hard. He learned modern drills, video analytics, biomechanics. But what impressed the instructors wasn't his grasp of data, it was his precision, his patience. The way he could take a nervous 14-year-old and in 5 minutes make them believe in their hands again. He didn't talk much, but when he spoke, the room leaned in. During a live assessment, a student fumbled a low cross. He slumped, embarrassed. Otto walked over, took off his own shoe, and rolled the ball gently with his foot. "Try again." The boy hesitated. "What if I drop it again?" Otto leaned down eye to eye. "Then you pick it up like it's the only thing that matters." And the boy did. 1 week later, Otto was assigned to assist a training camp for Ghana's U17 national pool. Not a volunteer post, a paid one. He reported at 600 a.m. sharp with a clipboard and a whistle he hadn't used since he lost his arm. The first drill he ran barefoot, not for show, but to remind the boys, you don't have to be equipped to be ready. Kofi stayed by the sideline, lying under a tree, becoming unofficial mascot. At lunch, the players sneaked him pieces of meat. By evening, someone painted his name on a locker coach dog. On the 10th day of camp, Otto returned to his dorm. A box waited on his bed. Inside 17 footballs, each hand-stitched, each signed, each with a note. They weren't official gifts, just tokens from boys who'd trained with him. Scribbled in permanent marker covering every panel. "You taught me how to fall. I stopped blaming my hands. Now I play like someone's watching. Thank you. I didn't quit because you didn't." But one stood out. From Yaw. Written carefully, each letter like a held breath. "I still dream with the ball under my pillow. You didn't keep it with your hands. You kept it in me. You kept it for all of us. And underneath, you didn't just save me, you saved the game." Otto sank onto the bed. Kofi laid his head on the pile of balls like it was a nest of gold. Otto ran his hand over the words, the stitches, the seams. And for the first time, he allowed himself to believe something dangerous. He had not come back from the edge. He had redrawn the edge entirely. They called it just a friendly. But in Gahin, when the U17 team hosts a European squad on home turf, it's never just a friendly. The stadium buzzed with flags and faces. Journalists with international badges, scouts in crisp blazers, and rows of hopeful parents sat pressed together under the bleachers. The match had been hyped for weeks. A test of the new crop's readiness. A showcase for the world. And for Otto Mensah, it was supposed to be just another day on the sidelines. He wore a Federation polo now, one with his name stitched over the heart. His whistle gleamed like silver. His clipboard carried drills, tactics, notes, but none of it compared to what stirred inside him as he stood behind the net and looked across the field. Because in goal stood Yaw, no longer the trembling boy from muddy village matches. Now taller, leaner, shoulders squared, gloves clean and laced. But when Yaw turned around during warm-up, his grin hadn't changed at all. "Still watching, coach," he called. Otto smirked. Still listening. Yaw tapped the side of his temple, then his chest, then pointed at the ball. Their code, 3 touches. Mind, heart, game. Otto nodded once. Then the whistle blew. The match began. Ghana pressed early, nearly scoring in the 6th minute. The crowd cheered, drums echoing through the stands. The European team played precise, calculated, disciplined, but they weren't prepared for Ghana's hunger. By halftime, it was a murrow. Every muscle tense, every clearance felt like a declaration. Yaw blocked 2 sharp headers. and one low cross that kissed the edge of the post. He moved like instinct dressed in skin. But Otto noticed the signs, the twitch in Yaw's shoulder after that last dive, the stiffness in his leg as he rose. Something wasn't right. Then it happened. In the 63rd minute, Ghana's striker was brought down just outside the box. Red card. The opposing captain argued. The crowd exploded. The referee stood firm. Ghana lined up for a free kick, but it was short-lived, because on the next counter the visitors charged fast fluid, and the Ghanaian keeper, already tired, had to sprint forward to meet the striker head-on. They collided. A brutal bone slap sound. The stadium gasped. Medical ran out immediately. Trainers surrounded the boy. He didn't rise. Otto clenched the fence. Mensah ran down from the bench. And in the chaos, no one noticed Yaw stepping forward. Not even the second-string keeper warming up. "I've got it," Yaw said, voice low but steady. Mensah paused, looked him in the eye. "You sure?" Yaw nodded once. Otto met his gaze from behind the net. No words. Just the same signal as always. Mind, heart, game. Then Yaw stepped in. The fourth official raised the sign. New keeper. Final 10 minutes. Tie score. Tension wrapped the crowd like a noose. Then minute 89. The European team won a free kick on the edge of the box. Perfect angle. Their number 10 stepped up. The same boy who'd scored 3 in the last tournament. The stadium fell to a hush. Otto stood just behind the net, still not allowed onto the official coaching zone, but closer than anyone else. Yaw crouched, eyes wide, breathing slow. Otto whispered, barely audible, but just loud enough for one voice to reach through noise. "Watch the shoulder." 10 stepped back. 2 steps. 3. Stared down Yaw like a bullfighter. Then he moved. Fast, but not fast enough. His plant foot twisted too much inward. His left arm swung late. And that was the cue. Yaw remembered everything. The angle. The shape of the run. The tiny pause at the end. He dove before the ball curved, not guessing. Reading. Trusting. The ball whipped past the wall, exactly where it shouldn't have gone. But Yaw was there, midair. Glove out. One palm. Whack! The ball didn't pass. It rebounded. He crashed to the ground, gasping. Then curled over the ball, held it against his chest like a lifeline. The whistle blew. Full time. 1-0. Victory. The stadium erupted. Chants, screams, paper flying. Drums beating harder than hearts. Yaw didn't stand. He just looked over at the back of the net. Otto was still there, smiling, eyes wet. Hand pressed to his own chest. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Mensah ran onto the pitch, grabbed Yaw, lifted him to his feet. Reporters surrounded him. Cameras flashing. One mic pushed in. "What made you dive early?" a journalist asked. Yaw looked past them all, toward Otto, and said, "Because someone taught me to listen before I hear, and trust before I see." The clip would go global, but Otto didn't care. He walked to the edge of the field, Kofi at his side. He didn't cross the line, just stood there, watching the boy who once feared falling, now flying. The stadium was empty now, just the sound of distant sweepers brushing popcorn wrappers from under the bleachers and the occasional clatter of a metal gate being locked for the night. But in the center of the pitch, beneath the soft hum of floodlights slowly dimming, one man remained. Otto stood alone. The signature ball rested in his hand, still scuffed from the winning save, still stamped with names, numbers, tiny words of belief. He wiped it gently with the same old rag. Not for the camera, not for show, just like always, as if honoring a ceremony older than memory. Kofi trotted in slow circles around him, tail sweeping the grass, nose low, as if still searching for echoes of the match. Then he lay down quietly at Otto's feet, watching. The seats were rows of blue ghosts, now empty and silent. But Otto wasn't looking at them. His eyes were on the ball. He whispered something only the ball could hear. Then, a voice behind him, small, hesitant, real. "Mister." He turned. A boy stood there. No older than 10. One leg in a brace, dragging slightly, but eyes bright. He held something in both hands, a dirty, misshapen soccer ball. The kind that looks more like cloth than sport. "Someone said you fix dreams," the boy said. Otto blinked. The child looked down, embarrassed. "I mean, you fix balls. But my mom said dreams too." He held the tattered ball out. "It's not much," he added. "But it used to bounce." Otto didn't speak right away. He simply reached out with his right hand, steady and sure, and took the ball. Ran his fingers over the seams. Felt the torn leather, the old stitching, the places where life had hit too hard. He looked the boy in the eyes and smiled. "Don't worry," Otto said. His voice was low, steady, familiar. "The ball never leaves you." The boy tilted his head. "It doesn't?" "No," Otto said. "Sometimes we drop it. Sometimes the world knocks it away. But the ball, it waits. Quiet, patient, until you're ready to hold it again." He bent slightly, just enough to press the ball against his heart. "Bongchubazabata," he whispered again. The boy didn't know the language, but he understood the meaning, and smiled. As the child walked away, Kofi stood, wagged his tail, then bumped his head against Otto's side. The man looked down at the dog, then out across the field. The lights flickered once, then held steady. Otto dropped the rag, held the signed ball in one hand, the broken one under his arm, and ran. Not fast, not perfect, but free. Kofi galloped beside him, tongue lolling, both of them moving through the grass like they belonged to it. The camera pulled wide, upward, slow, as the man with one hand and the dog with 3 legs chased nothing but space and something unseen. The ball bounced once, twice, and Otto smiled. The final shot froze on his eyes, lit from the inside, like someone catching a dream and never letting it go.